Kick it, man.
I'm sure you heard that, right?
Yes, we did.
Let's get into it. 1, 2, 3. Let's get some more. Clap your hands. Some more. Let's get some more.
Well, welcome to this Wednesday edition of My Whiskey Den, your favorite public access whiskey review show. We are glad to have everyone here tonight, especially Ryan Maybee from J. Rieger, one of the great minds behind restarting Once Dead brand. I was going to just lay the rest, and with his background and everything to help move it forward and bring it back. I was really intrigued by the story. We'll get into part of that, but Mike, Ben, thanks for stopping in. What are you guys drinking tonight?
Actually, I have starting off with a little Rieger's Midwestern Dry Gin.
Oh, well, that sounds fair.
Yeah.
I think that would be very appropriate. Ben, what do you have in your glass?
Yeah, I've got a whole lineup ready to go. Starting off with the private stock, the Pinot Noir finished, the Gomer's pick.
Cheater. Ryan, what are you drinking? And thank you for stopping in again. We really, really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm drinking our Monogram Whiskey.
Oh.
Actually, the 2017. We just released the 2020 this week, and I'm revisiting our first one from a few years ago.
I did see that and have to admit I was a little jealous. Just the size barrels you guys aged it in are immense. So I get
They are
kind of excited.
How do you compare the two to each other?
Night and day.
Really?
And it's fascinating that they're so different because they're literally the same whiskeys that are in the bottle. It's just the finishing method is completely different, and the result couldn't be more opposite.
Wow. We love when there's that dramatic of a difference. So what was one of the first? We always kind of start rewind life when we kind of first start this. What was the first spirit you had that got you excited about? It sounds bad, but excited about drinking. In the whole industry that you're in, because I know you had a nightclub and some other restaurants and stuff, so you're in the industry for quite a while. But can you remember one that was like, this is what really makes me enjoy it?
It's hard for me to pinpoint a spirit, like a specific spirit that got me into it. I've been in the restaurant business since I was 16. Started out as a busser in a restaurant, waited tables. I did room service in hotels. And so I was always around all that stuff. I didn't always have an appreciation for it until later, but I was always around it. So I can't really necessarily pinpoint one spirit, although once I started bartending at the age of 21, I was working at Pierpont at Union Station. Mike, you might know that.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful bar, beautiful restaurant, and a massive back bar. And they had a really, really great single malt whiskey selection, even back in 1999 when we first opened. And so that was maybe the first category of spirits that really opened my eyes to just how profoundly dynamic whiskey can be. I learned a lot. It was really a fascinating kind of rabbit hole to go down once you get into single malt scotches. So that was maybe the first category that got me really intrigued.
That's cool. That happens with a lot of people. I was going to say, and it's neat that you, being like with the bar background, is whiskey like your favorite kind of, I don't know, favorite is so bad, but a spirit that you enjoy more than other ones, or is there, I doubt you're, just by looking, I'd say like scotch or gin or something, not necessarily vodka, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I could be wrong in that.
No, you're not wrong. No, I say whiskey probably, if I had to pick one, would be as a general category. I think it's got the most range and the most depth and complexity. If you just say whiskey, you can get whiskeys from all over the world that are dramatically different from one another. And even now, now we've got Japanese whiskeys and Korean single malts and all kinds of crazy stuff. So the category just keeps growing and getting more interesting.
Emily and Eli, thanks for stopping in and getting here on time. We appreciate that. I was going to say, tell us a bit about, we already kind of went into this but how many years did you spend like in the food industry and the bar industry? Because I know you started your own restaurant and the Rieger Hotel beforehand. I just want to touch on a bit of the history before we go forward into the brand itself.
Yeah, I'll give you a kind of a brief rundown. I started bartending at 21 at Pierpont's, and I was there for about 5 years. And I got a real appreciation for food and wine while working there. I got my sommelier certification during that time period. Took over the bar program, was more or less the head bartender, bar manager at the time. And then I left for a brief moment to sell wine. So I was a sales rep for a fine wine distributor. And then I hated it because I missed being in a restaurant, being behind a bar. And so that's when I was like, I've got to open my own place. And so I opened my first bar in 2006 in the Crossroads neighborhood of Kansas City. And it was actually a wine bar and coffee shop. It's called JP Wine Bar and Coffee House. If you're familiar with that neighborhood, it's now Tannin, that bar that where Tannin exists now. That's the one that I opened and built that place back in 2006. Sold it in 2008. And then because I really had this wild, crazy idea to start a dark, hidden, mysterious little craft cocktail speakeasy in a dark basement with an alley entrance, and everyone was like, "What is wrong with you?" I mean, because I had this like really successful high volume wine bar, but it just, I don't know, I wasn't in love with it, and I wanted to do something that I had this like, I don't know, I just needed to open Manifesto. It was something that was eating away at me. So I sold my share of JP Wine Bar and used what very, very little money I had and built a tiny, dark, hidden little basement cocktail lounge called Manifesto in 2009. And that's really where this story begins, because if it wasn't for Manifesto, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. I never would have discovered the Rieger history and all this wouldn't have happened. So 1 year after Manifesto started, I took over the first floor of that building, the old Rieger Hotel, with the intention of opening a restaurant. And that's how the Rieger restaurant happened. And in that process, I was looking into the history of the building, wanting to learn more about the Rieger name. I wanted old photos of the whole hotel to kind of build into the concept of the restaurant. And that's how I discovered Rieger Monogram Whiskey. And before that, I didn't even know that it even existed. And so then all of a sudden it was like, I hadn't even opened the doors to the restaurant yet. And I'm thinking how we have to resurrect this brand.
Yeah. And that's what I was like, it almost, the way I seeing it and reading it, because you guys have an awesome website gives you a ton of history about everything. It was almost like it triggered you, like you were, I don't want to say you're a historian, but the way you seemed like you approached it was like every time you learned something more, it got deeper and deeper and a little more exciting. And I just, from reading the website, like it keeps going back, and I'm like, I think Kansas City has a really cool distilling history to it that doesn't get played on enough from a couple of the distilleries there. You guys just have great backstories.
Oh yeah,
and I absolutely love them. They're fantastic backstories that go back 100 years or more sometimes with a couple of you. So I don't think that gets kind of impressed upon enough, and I love how you kind of feels like you clung to that once you started like peeling back layers, like you said, with the restaurant and stuff. It just became a little bit more exciting each time.
Oh, there's no question. And it was the history. It wasn't just the fact that it was a whiskey brand. It was the history of it and the fact that it existed in Kansas City and it was so big and led to so much development in Kansas City and then died with Prohibition and all those layers. And yeah, there's no question that history is what inspired resurrecting it. I mean, honestly, I say this all the time. It wasn't necessarily like I made a choice to try and resurrect the brand. I felt an obligation. I felt like this story had to be told, and it was our duty to bring back the Rieger brand, because it got killed by Prohibition. We can't let that stand. We got to bring it back.
When you guys were uncovering that, I know you had somebody who had a large collection of old bottles and stuff that had come forward, and but as you're kind of peeling back all this information, did you guys run across things that had kind of been lost in the Rieger family history as far as the distilling and how large the whiskey was?
We've now built a 4,000 square foot museum around it, and so the gentleman that had that collection, I reached out to him when I found him online. He was my first real introduction into the history of the brand, like getting to see the bottles and touch them and learn from them and see the ads. He had a really, really immense, collection. And so that was the first step in that direction. And then since then, I mean, I've compiled a huge collection of artifacts and things with brand and continue to learn more. And even today, we continue to keep learning more about our brand's history and the Rieger family. And then, of course, Andy Rieger had, separate pieces as well. And then, talk about uncovering things. I mean, in this process, when I first met Andy, he said that he was the last living Rieger. He was the last in that line of Riegers from that family. And well, since then, we've discovered a long lost cousin and who lives in Detroit. And he also had a bunch of Rieger memorabilia as well, and he added some things to the story. So it's really continued to just evolve and grow.
Nice. And Malcolm, thanks for joining us. He was mentioning history is often motivation paid forward. Yeah, I can see that. Appreciate that, Malcolm.
As you've been digging through this history, are there some particular facets that you've discovered or facts or things you've come across that, I mean, just leapt out to you that are really amazing or something you'd like to share?
There's a lot of different little stories, I mean, the Rieger family and what Alexander Rieger was able to do and capable of, even during, during Prohibition and losing his business. I mean, he could have lost everything. And thinking about where we are right now, I mean, just a few months ago, we were terrified of what might come of this and how are we going to save our company? And to think that, he survived Prohibition. Yeah, the brand shut down. He lost the brand because it became, against federal law. But he ended up building a banking empire out of it. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't just give up. He did what he had to do with the resources that were available to him, and he became very, very successful. So the Riegers founded Mercantile Bank. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that banking chain, which later got bought out by somebody else, but that was founded by Alexander Rieger. So there's a lot of pieces of the history that I think are really fascinating. And then there's a whole other timeline around the same period of Heim. So our current distillery is in the old Heim brewery, and they were a beer brewery here in Kansas City at the same time that J. Rieger was back in the 1880s. And they were massive. They were a huge nationally known beer brand, and they did all kinds of crazy things. Like I've got a ton of stories about the Heim family and what they contributed to Kansas City. They were quite eccentric, to say the least. So there's a whole bunch, and that's why we felt like we had to build a museum, to effectively tell the story and share all this with everybody.
And I'm glad you did, because I think that is something that's really unique to. Well, we think distilleries in general have become like a tourist destination rather than in the past where it was like, this is my warehouse. Like, you get to come in and look. It becomes half a day or an all-day trip for someone to go to it. So being able to go that in depth with the history and, like you said, actually seeing some of the stuff that the memorabilia people had, I think that really adds to the destination or the trip or experience that you're getting when you're going to the distillery.
I agree.
Besides being able to go down a slide, which is totally, you do not normally get to do that at most distilleries, but I like the playfulness, and I thought, I was like, you know what, I would so use that.
That is that one also is a bit of a surprise to me. We love being creative, and we love brainstorming ideas, and there's no such thing as an idea that's too crazy. So we just throw all these random things at the wall. And when the whole slide idea was first thrown out there, we all thought it was hilarious. We also, I didn't think it was realistic. I didn't think we would actually have a slide in our distillery. I mean, I was convinced it would end up getting cut from the budget or whatever. But, now that we have it, it's really obvious to me how valuable it is. I mean, about it. That's one of the first things that people mention. It's become Instagram famous. It's become like the most well-known, visual attribute to visiting our distillery. Like, everybody shares it, and that you can't buy that kind of press or exposure. It's really valuable. Not to mention the fact that also, with the Heim family having, they had electric parks. They built an amusement park right there next to the brewery back in the late 1890s. They had an alligator farm. They had, they were they were so eccentric. So I think having a slide in our distillery is a little bit of a nod to, to the Heim family and be like, yeah, we can get weird too.
That sounds, I like it. Like I said, it was just a fun aspect. And I told my wife, I'm like, well, not most people don't bring their kids, but sometimes you get stuck doing that on a vacation or a trip or something. I'm like, yeah, give them something to do for 10 minutes. Well, I read about whatever I feel like I want to read about, or get told about a cocktail for a second. Like, go down the slide twice. We'll catch you back here in a second.
Right.
Hey, Alan, good to see you. Emily and Aaron, thanks for stopping in. Sorry, Mike, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
So, with your background and having to work in bars for other people and also having your own, did that give you any ideas of, when this came around to you to start the distillery, where you're like, okay, I want to make sure to not do X, or I want to make sure that I do X?
No, we made so many mistakes. The irony is that when we started this, I was 7 years in, 8 years in on being a bar restaurant owner. And I think I was just starting to get really good at it. Like running the business side of it. So, and this is so different. I mean, we're a manufacturer. We're not necessarily a bar restaurant concept. I mean, we're a manufacturer. It's a totally different business mindset. And so, it requires a different skill set, and we've learned a lot along the way. Unfortunately, Andy Rieger, my partner, comes from a different background that has really prepared him for his role and to make this business what it is. I mean, it's a different animal.
Yeah. And just to go back to the history part, how did you end up meeting just so serendipitously your business partner?
He came into the restaurant on opening night. I didn't know he existed. He was living in Dallas, Texas, and we opened on December 20th, 2010. And he had heard about it, and he had heard that these guys were opening a restaurant in the old 100-year-old Rieger Hotel, and calling it the Rieger. And there's a couple local newspaper articles about it, and he heard about it, and he wanted to see it, and he wanted to introduce himself, and so he just came in, and that's how it happened. The rest is history.
I love it. It's just the sheer chances of stuff going the right way when you think about life, how serendipitous and how perfect that is. It's like, oh, and you showed up on opening night. It doesn't get better than that. Yeah. So let's see here. Well, I was basically, when you were kind of starting the distillery, you guys brought in Dave Pickerell, which thought was an awesome idea. And we were talking about before the show, when you guys went to make your gin, you brought in Tom Nickel as well too. Both veterans of the industry who are very well known for making wonderful spirits. Was that like a background thought, or was that something that was a driving force when you guys started the distillery? Was it we want to bring in people who know what they're doing to kind of set the right groundwork for everything? Because those were two massive names. Yeah, no,
it was absolutely intentional and planned that way. But we didn't know for sure if we'd be able to make it happen, but it was absolutely our intent to associate ourselves with and partner with people who knew what they were doing. And the last thing we wanted to do was take this enormous risk and take this giant leap of resurrecting the brand and then not make a good product, or make some really, really devastating mistakes early on. So having someone like Pick there from the beginning was absolutely vital and invaluable to us. I mean, we learned so much from him. He didn't just help us with, sourcing the barrels or teaching us how to distill. He taught us what we needed to know, what kind of building we needed, in a distillery, and the utility requirements, and where to source bottles, and how to handle the TTB, and that's a nightmare, the federal taxes and TTB permitting, licensing, all that. I mean, that's a nightmare, and for a startup business, you just kind of have to stumble your way through it and figure it out. So we were definitely. We had an advantage, having him on our side to help hold our hand through that process. Yeah,
that's awesome. And talking about the Kansas City whiskey, what goes into the blend that you guys have in the actual whiskey? I know I have it in front of me, but not everyone does. So I just want to go over that with them, because I remember having it like 2 years ago, and I absolutely loved the fact that it had some sherry in it. Even if it was just a little bit, like I could really taste it, and it really played a significant role in the whiskey. Sorry, I already gave part of it away. I don't know what to do.
No, I mean, that's fine. Yeah, so it's I guess I'll kind of start from the beginning on it. You know, when we started the brand, the history of J. Rieger and Company, we were always first and foremost a whiskey brand. Now, by the time Prohibition hit and we went out of business, we had over 100 products. We had all kinds of crazy things, but we were still primarily whiskey. And so in resurrecting J. Rieger and Company, we wanted to resurrect it as a whiskey brand, first and foremost. The trouble with that is, if you're going to start from scratch and you're going to start, fermenting, mashing, fermenting grain, distilling, barrel aging, and if you do it right, you're talking 4 or 5 years before you have a product to put in the bottle. And that was not a realistic outlook for us either. It wasn't financially feasible. So the other way to go about that is, you can start by launching the whiskey, but you have to source the product. You have to buy barrels that are already fully matured, close to fully matured, and then you come up with your own blend or whatever. Or in a lot of cases, not in our case, but in a lot of other cases, it's really common practice for startup brands to just buy barrels of bourbon from MGPI or some other large distillery and just put that bourbon right into their bottle with their label on it and send it out. It's not uncommon. That's how Bullet started. That's how High West started. That's how Templeton started, and the list just goes on and on and on. But what we wanted to do, we always tend to do things the hard way, because we want to do something that's a little bit more special and unique and proprietary. And so we said, yeah, we're going to source some barrels, but let's not just source these barrels and just bottle it as is. Let's blend it. Let's do something proprietary. And it was, that process of like trying to figure that part out while also researching the history of the brand. But that was a parallel process, because I wanted to know what we were making back then. Blended whiskey back in the 1850s through the 1890s, early 1900s, that was way more common than bourbon or rye or anything else. Mm-hmm. Blended American rectified whiskey was probably 75 to 90% of all American whiskey. The problem is that we don't know exactly what those blends consisted of, because there was no federal regulation around. There were no permits, no licenses, no records kept. You could put whatever you wanted in the bottle. And so I was trying to figure out, what were we putting in the bottle, and let's get as close to that as possible. And so what we ended up with was, we ended up sourcing some, at the time, about 8 or 9 year old light corn whiskey from MGPI, which light corn whiskey is its own category. Nobody really ever bottles it on its own, but it is really good, and it's very, very similar to bourbon. It's kind of like bourbon that's a little bit softer, a little bit lighter, but it's really good whiskey if made right. So we bought a whole bunch of light corn whiskey, and while I didn't want to just bottle that by itself, we then went out and got some rye from Alberta. We got some 11-year-old rye from Alberta. It was the exact same rye that was going into Whistle Pig, and we blended that rye into, that's all right. I mean, it was literally the exact same thing as Whistle. We essentially got Whistle Pig. It's just, rye whiskey in the barrel from Alberta, and blended that into the light corn. We played around with a number of different percentages and, ratios and all that. And we got pretty close to like what I thought was pretty good and where I wanted it, but I wasn't convinced yet. And so it was literally just about 7 years ago this past week, where I went down to New Orleans, and I met with Dave Pickerell at the Carousel Bar at the Hotel Monteleone, and I brought a flask with me of the blend, because Dave was helping us like find the whiskeys, buy the barrels, get the samples, and then Andy and I were making the blend in my loft in the Crossroads, so we were formulating the recipe on our own. And then I met up with Pick in New Orleans at the Carousel Bar, and I brought him a sample of it and said, here, try this. And he was like, it's really good. I'm like, I think it's really good too, but for some reason I'm not there yet. Like, it needs something else. And that led us down this really interesting conversation about historic rectification methods. And that's where we stumbled onto the historic use of sherry. And that just kind of blew my mind. Like, when I learned that sherry was a common addition to American whiskey, and I didn't know before that day, I was obsessed with that idea. And I was like, that's it. That's what we have to do. Like we have to add sherry. And literally 1 month later, I was on a flight with Steve Olson headed to Madrid to go source sherry.
Nice. Sorry, just smile of excitement there. That sounds like a good 2 months. It sounds like a really good 2 months.
It was exciting, absolutely. And if you don't know Steve Olson, let me say who Steve is real quick. So Steve is one of my old friends and a mentor of mine. I've known him since like 2007, and he's one of the co-founders of Del Maguey Mezcal. If you're familiar with Del Maguey, so he like really kind of, along with Ron Cooper, started the whole mezcal category. He also helped launch and market Tanqueray No. 10 in the United States back in the early 2000s. And then he was also, ironically, he's one of the world's foremost sherry experts, and for years was hired by the Spanish government to educate American bartenders and consumers on sherry. So he was obviously, when I learned about the historic use of sherry in American whiskey, he was the first person I went to. I was like, Steve, you got to see this. He didn't know about that either. And his eyes just got all wide. And he's like, we have to go to Spain. Like, let's do it.
And that's even cooler that he didn't know about it. That's where you're like expecting to bring it up and get the education lesson. And you're like, right. Son of a bitch, I had no idea. I like the method. Let's get out of here. Let's go check this out. We're going to Spain.
Yep.
So were y'all working with different types of sherry before deciding on the Oloroso that you added in?
Yeah, we brought back. Yeah, we went there. We were there in Jerez for about a week, and we visited a whole bunch of the bodegas. And we brought back multiple samples from different wineries. We had based on the flavor profile that we had already with the corn whiskey and the rye, we both thought Oloroso was going to be the way to go. But we were open to experimenting. So we experimented with Amontillado and Palo Cortados and different styles, but we ended up landing on that 15-year-old Oloroso from Williams & Humber, which is, it was just perfect and beautiful. And they're also great partners to work with.
Do you use the same sherry or barrels or same winery or sherry? I don't know what the hell the name of this place that makes sherry is. That's my mind just goes blanks.
Yeah, right.
Do you use them for the Monogram as well too?
Well, the difference with Monogram is we actually, in the Kansas City whiskey, just to be clear, we add sherry to it. We literally add 2% 15-year-old Oloroso sherry to the final blend. Yep. And that was really common back in pre-prohibition times, but nobody had remembered it or been doing it. So we literally add that to it. In the Monogram, we don't add the sherry to it. We literally take those separate whiskeys and we fill the sherry casks with the whiskey and let it finish in there. And right now, those sherry casks, which we operate as a Solera, where we do fractional blending and everything, they've now been in operation for over 5 years. And so the 2020 Monogram that just came out, the oldest whiskey that's in that bottle is 15 years old.
Wow,
that's crazy.
Yeah,
and awesome, by the way.
Yeah.
I remember seeing pictures of those. Those barrels are ginormous.
Yeah, they're double the size of a regular whiskey barrel. They're 500 liters. They're huge. They weigh a couple thousand pounds.
But like you're saying, you've had the Monogram, like the 2020 edition. How has it changed over the past few, say like 5 years or so since you've been releasing it, or even the 3 years or so since you guys have been releasing it, from the beginning to now, after you're getting 4 or 5 more years of complexity layered in with the Solera system?
So the 2017 one I'm drinking right now, this was the first one that we did, and the sherry component from the casks is really profound and aggressive. We filled those wet sherry casks, and those sherry casks are 100 years old. They've literally had sherry in them for a century. And so I think adding whiskey to those casks after 100 years was quite a shock. You know what I mean? And the sherry really, it pulled a lot of the sherry out of it. But since we've now been managing those casks for 5 years, and we've pulled whiskey out, topped them back off, refilled them, bottled, and we've gone through this process now multiple times. They're really coming into their own as whiskey casks. The 2020 is a little less aggressive. This one's like really robust. I would almost, in some ways, describe it almost like an Islay malt Scotch that's like really, really big and peaty and smoky. You know what I mean? It's got that kind of like muscle to it. Whereas now the 2020 is just a little bit more elegant, and it's still got a lot going on. It's still really a big, bold whiskey, but it's more whiskey and less of that sherry cask.
Okay. I haven't gotten to try those. Those ones, they're on my list of someone who lives there should try to pick them up when they can.
Yeah, right.
Type of thing.
Somebody
So,
who can make bottles appear somewhere else.
Yeah.
Whoever that is.
Just magic like that.
Magic.
Let's see here. Now, you guys, like we said, you guys moved into your new distillery, what I believe earlier this year. How are you guys enjoying the new distillery and the size and upgrade you guys got from doing that?
We opened it in July of 19. So we actually just turned 1 year old on the expansion. We enjoyed it, immensely until March. And now there's like the slide is taped off, but it's we love it. I mean, it's going to be there for generations. We've built our long-term, permanent, forever home, and it means a lot. So I sometimes still have to pinch myself that we even have something as extravagant as it is, because we can host large groups. We can get so creative, and we're so versatile that it actually, like, as crazy as it sounds, I mean, with the financial investment that we made in building that whole thing last year, I think we were in a better position now to weather the current storm than we would have been had we not built it, because we just have more room, more space, more opportunity to be versatile and to innovate. I don't know if we would have been able to like really pull off the hand sanitizer thing if we hadn't expanded the production floor, for example.
Yeah.
So that's a question that I had for you, because is my understanding you guys, with the pandemic and everything so far, you have not had to. You've been able to retain everybody. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And how is that a stroke of luck? I know it'd be kind of hard to say you planned it that way, but how were you able to do that?
Not luck. It was resiliency and just kind of a sheer determination within our whole company to work through it. And first off, say, okay, what now? Now what? What do we do? Let's come up with some ideas. Hand sanitizer was one of those ideas. And then it's one of those things where as soon as we figure out we can do something, we're already thinking, how do we do it better? You know what I mean? And how do we scale it as quickly as possible? And I mean, it still blows my mind to this day, like how quickly we scaled that hand sanitizer production in just 3 days. We did it in like 3 days, from the idea to like being able to produce 100,000 gallons. And it saved our company. I mean, it really did.
And that, like we were saying, it's just impressive, because we know with a lot of craft distilling, and we think you guys are maybe a step above that, but I was going to say, they're saying like 30 to 50% of the small craft distilleries will fail or could possibly disappear in the next year or so. And where you guys kind of stepped up to a bigger facility, you guys look like you're always ready to grow from kind of what I'm noticing. And with that, we were talking before the show, you guys are planning on expanding to Europe possibly as well too. So I think that's something that you guys are doing that is really unique, where everyone else is stuck kind of worrying how to do stuff. You're going, how do we take over more of the market? And you guys are usually working bigger and wider. And we've really only run into maybe 2 or 3 other distilleries that have been kind of geared in that mindset. So just intrigued by how Europe is going with breaking into Europe.
We haven't launched yet. In fact, the whole COVID situation slowed down that process. We were already looking into it before then. I was already having conversations with an importer in the EU prior to March, and we were kind of tentatively aiming for a midsummer, like July launch, and then COVID, completely put all that on the shelf. But after, like by June, even though we're still in the midst of all this, the conversation got picked up again, and we're like, well, why wait? Like why, we don't necessarily have to hold back. Like if there's an opportunity there, let's look at it and let's do it. So we're still very diligently approaching that, and I think it's probably going to come to fruition by the end of this year, if not that, then early next year.
Okay, very cool. We do have some friends over in Europe that like to get stuff, and they're even harder to make things appear at their homes. There's people in Europe sometimes. Canada's the worst.
Yeah.
Getting some people stuff up in Canada is horrific. It's just this.
With it really seems like you've got great distribution. I see it all over the Midwest and everything. Was that something? Did you luck into having somebody who was good about pushing the product out? That just a lot of work on your end, and also like what is for the online sales for it? Do you have preferred people you've worked with, or what's that looking like?
It's really complicated. I mean, if I'm being really honest, it's really, really very hard. Distribution of alcohol in the United States is horribly convoluted and antiquated. The laws are a mess. Every state's different. Taxes are different in every state. It's really hard to kind of navigate those systems. So it's, we've had a lot of failures with that as well. I mean, I like where we're at right now, and I think that we've done a really, really good job of building our brand here in our backyard and becoming a landmark for Kansas City and Missouri, and that's kind of sending ripples out beyond there. And then we have other pockets in the country where we have really good support, like Chicago. We do really well in Chicago and certain areas there. New York is a good market for it. Indiana, strangely enough, we have a really great distributor in Indiana. But that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to the distributor, because you can't sell direct. And you mentioned online, we can't sell online. Like, we can't sell direct anything from the distillery. Everything has to go through a licensed wholesale distributor in each state. And so those relationships are vital to being able to grow your distribution network. And it's really hard. I mean, it's a cutthroat industry. There's a reason the big brands that you see on every bar here in Kansas City, you also see on every bar in every other city in the country. I mean, because they really do corner the market. So for a startup, a small brand, for us, it's difficult to compete. But I think the way that we compete is because we have an authentic story, because we have really good products and a really good story behind it. And we're not just, we're not a marketing gimmick. There's a lot of new brands out there that sometimes you just don't have any idea like what they're really all about, or who the people are behind them. And with us, we're real, and I think that's really important. It's allowed us to, I often say, punch out of our weight class a little bit,
So you've got but with all of your various background you've had in this industry, what are some things that you would love to see changed, whether particular laws or just things that would help your business flourish?
Well, I'd love to see the 3-tier system just get blown up. Yeah. My distribution partners will not like me to hear me say that. And I love my distribution partners. We need them. But it's outdated. It's antiquated. The 3-tier system and the way that those laws they were written in 1934, and they really have not been revised since then. And it's an overarching federal law where then each state adopts that law and then they twist it in their own way. And it's just really, really messy.
So you said twist it was perfect.
Yeah. I mean, I unfortunately have to deal with this stuff very closely every day. So, I know it too well.
I was going to say, I was betting you'd hope we just want to go back to when we could be the largest mail order whiskey company in the U.S.
Say that. I say that all the time. I'm like, yeah, we were the largest mail order whiskey house in the country. I mean, people sent us cash in the mail and we shipped it to their front door. Can we just do that again? I mean,
you would almost think with what we're going through now, economy-wise, with the whole COVID-19 mess and everything, that it would be an impetus to kind of get the ball rolling to see some changes with this. If we want to keep these industries alive, I mean,
I think that's already happening. I mean, there are definitely some things that are happening, and there are indications that it will continue moving in that direction. I mean, if the goal for our economy is to not let 30 to 40% of the small businesses fail. We're going to have to make it easier for them to succeed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So let's maybe pull back the reins a little bit. And I think one really interesting example that's really obvious that should just be a flashing sign and saying like, look, this is how it works, is the to-go cocktail thing. Imagine how many bars would be out of business right now across the country if they were not given the temporary opportunity and permission to sell cocktails to go. But now once they're doing it and they're saving their business from it, you got to ask yourself, why is this temporary?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Why was this ever illegal to begin with? You know what I mean? Who cares?
Yeah, and I know even here it was a big deal for a lot of businesses right away, and then they came through with another sketchy law where it was like, well, now it has to be covered with like a certain lid or something like that, and they're like, fine, we're just using mason jars then. Fuck it, whatever we need to do to cheat the system, we will do it to keep our our business alive.
And the laws are always written like that, where the language is very blurry and gray. It's like some of the states, the requirement is that you can sell to-go cocktails as long as it comes with food. Like just food. Okay, so I can give them a little bag of popcorn and is that good? You know what I mean? If it's not specified, you kind of have to wonder like, well, what does that exactly mean? And why is that even written into it to begin with?
Every sale comes with a cookie,
Sure.
Here's your pickle.
Yeah.
We've been seeing a lot of that and hoping that would, even just in some of the states where like Virginia and other places, they got the okay to at least sell in state like that. Like maybe that would loosen up in other states, but it's slow going from where we see it, especially when we were saying we have some friends of the show that are in Europe and they can just hop on Amazon and order it from Prime or something like that and get whiskey delivered to their door. And you're like,
right.
See, it can be done in other places of the world. We can do it here. Yeah. I'm like, and if it's still about you getting your cut, I'm sure there's a way we could figure out for you to get your cut someplace in the chain of things. But just make it so people can survive or have a puncher's chance of surviving.
Absolutely.
Oh, excuse me.
So the private selection series, about how many of those have you guys done? Do you have any idea?
The private stock?
Or private stock, sorry.
We've done probably at least a dozen, maybe 15 or so. I'd have to look. It's been a fun little program. It's been really cool. And it gives us a chance to experiment with different finishing techniques and different casks, and it gives us a chance to collaborate with other, like-minded, creative, passionate business people, whether that's liquor store owners that want to buy it from us or wineries that want to collaborate with us on the barrel. It's been a fun project.
Is there anything that's come out of that you guys are like, we should make this?
No, nothing yet. No, I wouldn't say nothing that would be. The problem with it is it's not scalable. It's so custom. It's so literally one-off specific. It's not scalable to like make into a regular full-time available product.
Okay. So more just like a once a year thing, just kind of what you're doing. It comes out every now and then if someone wants something.
Well, it's specific sales to a specific buyer. So like, like a local liquor store, like I believe Ben said, you're drinking the one, the Pinot Noir from Gomer's.
Gomer's,
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like we did that barrel for Gomer's. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like they bought the whole thing. They bought every bottle that came out of that barrel. But it's not necessarily once a year, and there's no like timeline to it. It's whenever we find someone like that wants to buy something unique and put it on their shelf.
Wants to be kind of all in with the project too.
Right.
Like they're fully behind it.
It's almost like a store barrel pick type thing, except they're helping select what type of cask or determine.
It's exactly.
Yeah.
It's a single barrel program, except we take it a step further by saying you're not just going to come into our warehouse and say, I want that barrel, right? You're going to say, okay, you're going to taste through barrels. You're going to say, I want that barrel. And now what are we going to do with it? Are we do we want to finish it in a wine cask, in a beer cask? Do you have a winery that you really like that you want to work with? Maybe we can source one. That's where the creative collaboration comes into play.
Okay. That's really neat. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that because it's giving everyone who gets a barrel like that the ability to not only get like a special barrel, but to spin it as well too. Like just that extra little bit of play to it that makes it your own. Which if I had a liquor store would be all the excitement for me.
Have you guys toyed with finishing with any Isla barrels?
No, we haven't gotten anything from Scotland yet. I mean, we're open to anything, We've done other spirits. We've done like Laird's apple brandy. You might be familiar with. We've done a Laird's apple brandy finish. We've probably done more wine cask finishes than anything else, and then we've done some beer barrel finishes as well. I do have a couple of things in the works though that are unprecedented, though that are on the way.
Okay.
I like that word. Like, caught me. I was like, do what now? That's not supposed to ask about it. Leave it be.
Yeah. Don't investigate the big words, Patrick.
Yeah. But you guys do, like you were saying, have some bourbon and a rye release coming out probably next year. And we were talking before about this. It's not just like a 2-year rye or 2-year bourbon. Yours are already about five years in the barrel.
Yeah.
That is pretty, it's exceptional for what you're going to be putting out right away. I don't want to tell you how excited I am about that, but it's because we've met some people who've been doing some 2-year ryes that have been actually okay or pretty decent. But to see that once you see the difference between a 2 and like a 4 and a 6, you see the progression that really happens, and you're like, nice, good, holy crap, so you're kind of releasing at the more exciting levels and depth of character to it. Are you guys going to be doing any barrel finishes on the rye or the bourbon at all?
Don't know yet. So we've talked about it a little bit. It's going to come down to supply, right? I think we'll probably, everything that we put in a bottle, and when we release that straight rye and that straight bourbon, we'll probably sell. So then the question becomes, are we going to set some aside and want to do a barrel finishing program with those or not? Maybe we might set a few aside, but we also don't want to go through everything, as soon as it turns 5-6 years old. We want to set some aside so that we can bottle a 10-year and a 12-year down the road. So it's managing that inventory that's going to lead to those, whether we how much we release and what different products we release.
And not that you know for sure, but do you know how many barrels you guys have kind of aging in the warehouse right now?
Total barrels right now in the warehouse, we're probably 2,600, right around there. Yeah,
that's a really solid amount.
They're all 53-gallon barrels, all big whiskey barrels.
Okay,
it's a lot of booze.
That is a ton of booze. I love it.
Not a lot of booze. I mean, if you get down to Kentucky to some of the real big guys, it's really not that much.
Yeah, well, and that was it. The only other person we saw that was kind of aiming to grow forward out of this is when we were talking to Dancing Goat Distillery. They were in the process of building a couple of rick houses of their own. Where everyone else is kind of small, they were like you, kind of looking to grow or kind of take up a little bit more of the market share here in the future, or positioning themselves for the future better than some of the other places. And Mike will be back in a minute. He's just waiting for his computer to reboot after he got kicked off because of a storm. Which
it is storming here.
Which is fine. We'll only make fun of him a little bit while he's gone.
Yeah, just a wee bit. So how are you seeing in Kansas City, in the town, since you guys have gotten started, is there kind of a transformation going to becoming more of a craft booze, craft whiskey type community type town? Is there?
Well, I think Kansas Cityans in general have been into that kind of thing for a long time, just like any other city. When I started Manifesto 11 years ago, there were a lot of people that said, what I was trying to do wouldn't work. And even I was a little bit apprehensive about it. Like, are people really going to get it? but they got it. They got it
Yeah.
immediately. So it's not for a lack of market. It's not for a lack of interest or curiosity. That's definitely there. I think what we're starting to see now, though, is now there's a concentration of not only really great world-class restaurants and bars, but now also distilleries and breweries. And 20 years ago, it was like you had Boulevard, and that was Boulevard Beer. They kind of paved the way. But now look at how many options there are when it comes to microbreweries and now even distilleries as well. So I think it's kind of a natural evolution.
And I think, like I was saying before, I think Kansas City is underrated in the whiskey world in general. Just for the amount of experiences you can have within the city limits, I think you guys probably have like 6-7 different distilleries in the area.
We do, yeah.
I was gonna say, and that's actually a really large concentration compared to other states or other cities. I just found that, I don't want to say staggering, but like I said, I think highly underrated as a whiskey town.
Well, and not just Kansas City, but looking at the state of Missouri. Just within the state of Missouri right now, there's 38, 40-ish distilleries. Concentrated kind of like Kansas City, St. Louis, Columbia or Central Missouri, and then like Springfield down in the south. But there's a Missouri Craft Distillers Guild now, where all those companies get together and pool their resources to try and affect change and help each other out and market themselves and try and put us on the map.
And you guys have a real history to build. I mean, there's a historical foundation, for what you're doing there that I think you have really tapped into, and I'm hoping that's going to be an inspiration to others as well.
Absolutely.
Just because I'm very bad at this and I don't want to go backwards and forget stuff later on, Emily was just wondering, what other projects would you dream of, say, 5 years from now? Maybe the prepared cocktails or other medicinal products like sanitizer, or just other things kind of popping up in the future?
Well, it's hard I don't think I can predict 5 years out.
Yeah.
You'd asked me 5 years ago when we just launched Rieger's Kansas City Whiskey, where we would be in 5 years. I definitely would not have predicted what's happening now and like the distillery that we have now and the distribution we have now and all that. I mean, it's a little bit mind-boggling. So I can't predict 5 years. What I can say is that we're always thinking about, especially right now, we're thinking about innovation and next steps. And the hand sanitizer thing that she brings up is important because we did that out of necessity. Do you think I ever would have predicted that we would make hand sanitizer? Not a chance. But now that we have, and it's done such amazing things to help save our business, and it's done such amazing things for the community, and it's such a needed thing. I don't think we're ever going to stop making it. Even once the whole COVID thing is over, I think we will continue to maintain the hand sanitizer as a product for a couple of reasons. I think it helps tell the story, and I think it's a great story. It's a part of our history, but there's almost an element of, I think there's an opportunity for Rieger to not just be known as a spirits brand, but to some extent a lifestyle brand. I think there are definitely more things out there that we can be doing that would fit, within our narrative and fit within our brand. And I definitely think cocktails are a thing. I mean, I'm a bartender. I've been wanting to do RTDs and canned cocktails, bottled cocktails for a long time, and I think now is a good time to take that step. So that's definitely something that we'll be looking at as well. Who knows?
Yeah, well, that was literally my next question. I mean, your experience there, do you have some particular cocktails you would recommend or that you really like using your Kansas City whiskey with that you'd like to tell us about? Yeah,
I mean, first and foremost, the horse feather. So the horse feather is a kind of a Kansas City regional classic. It's got a local history to it. It's easy to make. And so that's a big, hurdle to get past when you're trying to brand a cocktail, to the masses. Make it simple. I don't want you having to go home and like prepare some crazy bitters and shrubs and things like that. Like, if you want that like intricate of a cocktail, go to a cocktail bar. But, if I want to mass market a cocktail, it has to be simple to make. And the Horseford is about as simple as it gets. So it's a highball, right? It's just our whiskey with ginger beer and a few dashes of Angostura bitters and squeeze a lemon. It's as easy as pouring a Jack and Coke. You know, it's real simple. It's really delicious. It has historic significance to Kansas City, and that is definitely our flagship cocktail. It's the Horsefeather. Aside from that, I mean, Rieger whiskey is very, very versatile and mixable. It makes a great whiskey sour. And I think the whiskey sour is an underappreciated cocktail. And I think often because, you know, people try to use straight bourbon and straight rye with it, and that overpowers it a little bit. Our whiskey is a little softer and a little bit more mixable. And so it makes an awesome whiskey sour. But you can get creative with it. You know, it's 92 proof. So it's going to hold up to some of those other secondary ingredients like bitters and vermouths and herbal liqueurs. And so plug it into any classic cocktail and go from there.
Very awesome. Now, we are usually about whiskey, but we have ventured off into gin a bit more, and we do have a little bit here. Do you mind giving us a little background? I don't want to read off the back here, but I was going to say, like you said, you brought in Tom Nickel to distill this or to make this. And for those of you who don't know, he has a historic past in gin. If I were understating that a little bit, I think. Do you want to give us a little background about him or why you brought him in to make this? And if it's okay, how many different ingredients are there in your gin? Is there a lot, or is there just a couple?
No, it's a smaller amount. Okay. So so we brought on Tom Nickel. Tom is the master distiller at Tanqueray. He worked for the company for 42 years. Started when he was 17 years old, and then eventually became their master distiller. And then Tom, as master distiller, created Tanqueray No. 10, which is the most awarded gin ever. Most industry experts just sort of put it on a pedestal all on its own, a step above the rest. Tanqueray No. 10 is iconic. He then also resurrected several old gin recipes from Charles Tanqueray's handwritten notes, like the Malacca gin, the Old Tom gin, and the Bloomsbury gin, if you're familiar with those from the Tanqueray line. So Tom is quite literally a living legend and considered by most to be the most accomplished gin distiller in history. And we got him because first off, we wanted to make a gin, but making gin is really hard. It's really an art form. You know, after the Kansas City whiskey, and we figured that out. The next thing we released was vodka, and anyone can make vodka. Vodka is pretty simple. Gin is not. Gin is very complex, and it takes someone who knows what they're doing. And so we didn't want to screw it up. We were doing really well, building the brand with our whiskey, and the vodka was doing well. And we didn't want to come out with a bad product. And so we weren't going to do it unless we knew we had a real winner. And so Tom came along because I mentioned Steve Olson earlier. Steve Olson he's actually a partner in the company as well. He's an old friend of mine and my mentor. And he got to know Tom back in the 2000s when he was promoting Tanqueray No. 10 in the United States. He had a consulting company that got hired by Diageo to help educate and promote Tanqueray No. 10. And so Steve got to know Tom really well, and they became like best friends. And so Steve kept saying to me, when we first started the company, he's like, if you ever want to make a gin, like, you need to get Tom Nickel. And I'm like, how are we going to get Tom Nickel? I mean, we're not Diageo. I'm like, okay, Steve, it sounds great. You know, I didn't really take it seriously. But then, we kept talking about it. And then one day we're like, all right, let's sure, why not? And he lives in Scotland. And in 2015, we flew him from Scotland here in Kansas City. And he spent a week with us here at the distillery, not the new one, but, before we built that. And I think he had a lot of culture shock. We've pumped him full of Boulevard Tank 7 and Kansas City barbecue. And at the end of it all, he agreed to join our little ragtag bunch here in the Midwest.
That's awesome.
He retired from Tanqueray early after 42 years, and then 1 month later announced that he was joining our company in Kansas City. And it was announced in the New York Times. And when it came out, when the article came out, I had friends and industry people from around the country just blowing me up, like, how the hell did you do that?
So like I'm not sure it still happened, but we're going with it.
Right.
Yeah,
it's pretty amazing. And this one it's like you said, it's like a London dry gin, but you guys call it the Midwest gin.
Yeah, let me explain that. So categorically speaking, it's London dry. We wanted to make a London dry style because that London dry style is very, it's traditional. It's Tanqueray, it's Beefeater, it's Plymouth. It's those brands that you know and love. It's also the brands that all of those amazing classic cocktails were built off of. The Martini, the Negroni, the Gin Tonic, like those are all built off of London dries. You see this new category today, and there's all these new gins out there that are known as New Western gins. They're not London dry, but they're New Western. What that means is it's a lot less on the juniper, and it can be a whole bunch of other different flavors. And some of them are really good, and some of them are really weird. But either way, they don't necessarily, you can't just plug it into a Negroni and have it taste right. And so we want to just go old school, straightforward London dry, and that's what Tom does. I mean, that's what he's known for. So we wanted to make a London dry gin, so we used only 5 ingredients. It's foremost juniper berry. We've then got coriander, angelica root, licorice root, and then dried orange peel. So there is a little bit of citrus that you're probably picking up. That's orange is dried orange peel instead of like whole orange. It's really wonderful. I mean, he did a great job. And you mentioned the label says Midwestern dry. Here's the thing. Technically speaking, legally speaking, we could call it London dry gin because the United States TTB doesn't prevent anyone from using that term, even though they probably should. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It could be called London dry gin, even though it's made in Kansas City, but we thought that would be confusing, right? And so then we were kind of like, well, how do we categorize it? How do we explain what it is? We considered maybe just calling it an American dry gin. We thought that was a little too broad. So let's just call it Midwestern dry and then explain that it's a London dry style.
That's cool. And just because I want to get some of the people in the chat like a chance to understand what we're talking about, because the three of us were very fearful of gin up until recently, just because we had the old gin that's tasted and kind of smelt like the air freshener, the Pine Sol air freshener. So it had kind of ruined us on it for a bit, but our eyes have been opened more recently, so we're becoming a little bit bigger fans of the whole spirits industry rather than just whiskey.
Love it.
I'm definitely finding this extremely tolerable. Like I especially even with the black, you said the licorice root, and I usually have huge issues with licorice. Sorry, it's a running thing on the show. I have issues with it.
Let me explain. So you're definitely not tasting any licorice.
No.
That's there for. Licorice root. It's literally the root from the plant in the ground. It's a sweetener, and that's all it does. It's literally 25 times sweeter than sugar cane by volume. And all we do is we grind it into a powder and then add it to the still during distillation, and it functions as. So here, I'll tell you a quick story. When Tom was developing the recipe in our distillery, and I was tasting the first runs off the still, I was like, I get everything. The orange is like around the nose. Obviously, the juniper is right up front. That's like the lead singer. The coriander is like the lead guitarist. I mean, everything plays its part. But I'm like, I don't get the licorice. He's like, that's good. You're not supposed to. And I'm like, well, why is it there? He explained that it acts as a sweetener that pushes other flavors to the front. And I can relate to that as a bartender, because when I think about building a cocktail and the use of sugar doesn't just make a drink sweet. But if you go too light on the sugar on a drink like a daiquiri or something along those lines, or a margarita or whatever, if you don't have enough sweetener in there, it has the alcohol overwhelms the flavor. The sugar acts like salt does in food, and it amplifies other flavors. And so that licorice root is there to literally amplify the other flavors of the gin.
Yeah, and that's exactly what, for me, I mean, like Patrick said, we're kind of new converts to gin, and the experience that I've had, what I've found is the more simpler the gin, the fewer the ingredients, really, the more I enjoy it. And what I'm getting with this, the juniper's up front, but it's not harsh. It's really well rounded, and that coriander, like you said, is right there. And then it's that citrus and orange note that's kind of just under the surface, just a little hint there, and it's just got the right balance of sweetness to it. And yeah, I'm really enjoying this. I mean, our first introduction was Death Door Gin, and we really enjoyed that. And this one, this is really nice. So anybody out there watching, you're a gin fan, this is a great one to try, in my opinion. I'm just sipping it neat here. It's really good. Yeah,
and I'm sipping it neat. I can tell that it would go good in cocktails. Like it was already spinning my wheels in my head. I'm like, you could add this to other stuff and really make something interesting to it.
And that's really the purpose. I mean, you don't often see people drinking gin neat, and I don't drink gin neat that often either. But this is one that it is so impeccably balanced and so well made that I will drink it neat. But gin is built for cocktails. That's the whole purpose for gin. So, and you can make thousands of them.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now we are getting. We just are a little over an hour, and we usually don't like to keep people too long, just because we respect the life and time that you kind of shared with us already, and we know how busy everyone is just in general. So we appreciate you coming on and staying on as long as you have. We are really excited about some of the new stuff coming out. And Emily Chambers is accurate. Good gin is underrated. That's apparently because it was hard for me to find. I just kept getting the stuff from my parents fed to me that was like someone bought them a cocktail and like, "Ooh, I don't like this here. Why don't you try it?" And I would get caught thinking it was a trap because I wasn't 21 yet, and I'm like, "This is a trick." And here it was them just giving me bad cocktails. Trying to get rid of them. I'm like, a little shady on their part. But yeah. So, are there any other releases coming out this year? Anything else that you guys are doing? Wait, you guys did other cool stuff during the pandemic. Sorry, I got close to the closing. But you guys did a kick-ass movie night where you would have people online and you would watch a show and then you would have everyone else in like a group chat or something.
It's still going on. It's actually going on right now.
Oh, is that? I didn't know.
It's every Wednesday night at 8:00.
Okay. Because I thought that was awesome. I thought that was a fantastic way to get people together. And it was, thing is you guys were picking good movies. It's
really been a fun project. I personally ran it for about the first 7 or 8 weeks, and then handed it off to one of our sales reps, and now she's kind of managing it now, and we're in like week 18 or 19, I think. But it's been great because all we wanted to do, we knew that bars and restaurants across the country were closing, right? And bartenders were out of work, and they are our people. They are my friends. They are our customers. They are our advocates. They are the ones that, we don't have a brand without them. And so we had to ask ourselves, how do we keep them motivated, happy, in touch with them, since I can't travel to go see them? I mean, I spent most of my life on the road prior to this. So now that I can't go visit them in person and go to these other markets and visit their bars, what are we going to do? And so the Netflix and Cheers thing was kind of a fun, whimsical idea that allowed us to have one night a week where everyone just got together, and it's not sales pitchy or anything like that. It's just fun. It's just like, let's hang out and watch a movie, and we're all watching the same movie on Netflix, and there's like this little chat box, on the side, and I think people are paying less attention to the movie and more attention to the chat. But then we paired every movie with a cocktail, so people would make cocktails at home. It was just a fun, creative thing to do.
It was a really uniquely engaging thing, is what I thought. It was like when everyone was, like you said, staying at home, whatever. This was a way to like bring people out to kind of break up a night, to have a good evening again, and talk to friends or people you didn't know. But it was very open to everyone. Like I said, you guys were picking good movies. Yeah. I know there was one night I got stuck. We were supposed to do stuff. I'm like, I don't remember what it was, but I was like, I don't remember. It was like Great Outdoors or something. I was like, damn it, I really kind of just want to watch the movie tonight. I'm like, I want to skip what I'm doing.
A lot of like old classics, that are really fun. We did Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's been a lot of fun, and it's still going.
No, but yeah. So if you get a chance, check that out. You should there's probably still going on for another 20 minutes or so, if not more, this evening.
Right.
But yeah, I thought that was something that was really, you guys were just doing unique stuff that was engaging to people, marketing wise, and I thought that was really good. I think that's what's also helping build the brand up to where you guys are now and where you're going to go. So I think it's, I won't say sky's the limit, but you guys have a lot of open room to go. And I haven't heard anyone who's ever had the Kansas City whiskey say anything bad about it, or have an issue with it or anything like that. A lot of times there's going to be someone who doesn't like something. In general, you're going to find that person. There's going to be a couple people who don't, but I haven't run across that yet.
Well, if you do, send them my way.
No, I've taken this to different groups and introduced it to them, and they've all been big fans. Since I had a friend there that's a fan of the show, Steven, that sent me my first bottle of this about a year ago, and I've loved it since. I love taking it to different tastings and whatnot, and especially for my area here in South Carolina, we don't really have access to it, so they get to try something really new and different, and everybody has loved it. So,
well, thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But we appreciate you coming on, Ryan. We really do. But we'll let you go get back to normal life, which is good. But we can't thank you enough for sending a couple bottles out and coming on the show. We'll probably go over these, at least the gin again in another review, because I know I did the Kansas City one. The Pinot one was really good. You guys are putting out some really nice stuff.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
It's really nice stuff. And we're just lucky people like you get to come on, and we just want everyone out there to know what you guys are doing when you go to Kansas City. Definitely a place to stop at if you can, whenever you go, to stop out and check out and at least pick up a couple bottles there if you can't get in and get a tour or something, because you're not going to be disappointed with it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
No problem. So remember, everyone, it's not the size of the den that matters. It's the love of whiskey. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Let's get into it. 1, 2, 3. Let's get the flow.